Is it?
No, sir, I don't know. I personally don't know.
You are what, a dual degree student or a
A
2-year
dual
MTech?
degree. Dual degree.
Okay, 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 okay. But the 2-year MTechs, no. So we are in a little bit of a strange situation where the 2-year MTech we did in the engineering software lab, correct?
Yes, sir. We had
Yes,
only
sir.
one class about basics about.
Okay, no harm in repeating. I think sometime in the next week we will start our discussion in software. So we'll have a basic training in the software, and then through the rest of the course we'll only look at advanced features which are specific to composite materials. So we'll have a look at those features. Okay, this is one. The second thing is about MTech thesis. So most of you are either 2-year MTechs or dual degree students who will be undertaking a thesis, who have to undertake a thesis next year, right? So I want to announce that like every year, I would like to take 4 to 5 MTech students, or maybe even more depending on what the strength is. And one of my basic requirements is that you have to register for this course, which you already have done. So as far as possible, I would like to select from the 40 students who are already part of this class. The type of work that we expect normally is that there are wide range of projects, but out of that only maybe 1 or 2 are experimental. The rest is mostly modeling. Modeling, either it could be finite element software Abacus or some modeling in MATLAB. There are also a couple of projects on machine learning, where proper machine learning we are doing, not just advanced statistics, but machine learning. So if you're interested, let me know, and then I can maybe describe more in detail, or I can describe it just now also. But my one condition is that whoever does MTP with me has to write the thesis twice. Twice means one is the thesis that he will write as a part of his curriculum, but also the second requirement is that the thesis is also written in the form of a paper. Whether we submit the paper for publication or for review, etc., is another matter, but I physically want 2 copies of your thesis in 2 different formats. So that is my only condition. So if you are interested, let me know. Okay?
Okay, sir.
I think just now I don't need to describe the specifics of the project, right? That later on, if you're interested, you can get in touch with me. Okay, so recording has started. Now, should we discuss the question paper quickly?
Yes, sir.
Let's quickly do
Yes,
that.
sir.
Is the PDF visible?
Yes,
Is the
sir.
Yes.
PDF?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Okay. So question number 1. Consider a unidirectional continuous fiber composite made of ductile fiber and brittle matrix. What is the fiber volume fraction needed? The strength of the composite is thrice. So since it is thrice, we only have to look at the right hand side of the curve. On the left, I mean, remember the strength and volume fraction curve was bilinear most of the times on both the cases. And in bilinear, since it is thrice, you just have to look at the right hand side of the curve, because thrice the strength of the matrix can never be reached on the left hand side where the volume fraction is low. So we only have to look at the condition where the fiber volume fraction is high. This is relatively straightforward, I think. Yes or no? I think most of you got it right. इसमें कुछ trick नहीं है. The second question, this is a material which is transversely isotropic, and in the plane that we are seeing, to completely define the Q matrix, you just need 2 constants. Okay, question number 3. Question number 3 is an industrial part made of composites is designed for structural application, dimensions of 75 centimeter about, 50 parts to be manufactured daily. So in this question, the keywords are, it is structural application, 50 parts. You have to suggest the manufacturing method and the fiber architecture. Okay. So let's go one by one. If it is structural application, it means that you have to use either unidirectional fibers or you have to use textile. If you use short fiber composites, you will not have a structural application. Okay. So this is answer of the second part of the question. What fiber architecture? Any one of textile or unidirectional composite. This has to be mentioned carefully. Then the first part, what manufacturing method? Since the number of parts is very low, it's only 50. And the fact that it is structural and we want good quality, the suggested method should be hand layup plus autoclave or hand layup plus oven. Hand layup is not a manufacturing method. It is a method by which you lay up. After laying up, you have to put it in an autoclave or something. So the correct answer is hand layup followed by autoclave or hand layup followed by some oven heating. Any other answer perhaps is not right. You cannot do compression molding because it's only 50 parts, it's structural. You will definitely not do injection molding. You will not do RTM. RTM is borderline. I mean, yeah, you could do borderline. You could do RTM, but still it is not the preferred. So these are some of the answers. It's open-ended, so there is more than one answer. Correct. The optimal answer is autoclave. RTM perhaps, but everything else perhaps is not right. Okay, understood?
Yes, sir.
Any questions so far?
Sir, why can't we do injection compression molding?
Because it is structural. There are two reasons. Injection molding will only lead to short fibers. You cannot injection mold composites with unidirectional continuous fiber. If it is short fiber, then it will be semi-structural application. This is number one. Number 2 point is, if you want to only make 50 parts, why will you spend so much money and trying to buy an injection molding machine, which is very expensive?
Okay, sir.
Okay, so question 4. Can the strength of a fiber reinforced composite be lower than the strength of the matrix? The answer is yes. Remember this strength versus volume fraction. When volume fraction is low and the fibers are brittle, then you have fibers actually behaving like voids. So if for low fiber volume fractions and brittle fiber, this is possible. Question 5. Calculate the effective modulus of a short fiber with aspect ratio equal to the critical aspect ratio. Axial strength is 1000 megapascal, shear strength is 20. Modulus of fiber and matrix is given, shear modulus is given. So the first thing you have to do while solving this question is calculate the aspect ratio. It should be equal to critical aspect ratio. So using this data, which is the axial and the using this data, you can calculate the aspect ratio. I think it will come out to be 1000 divided by 2 into 20.
Yes,
Yes.
sir. 25.
25. Now that you know that the aspect ratio is 25 and you know the modulus, you can calculate using the Cox modulus. Cox model, you can calculate the modulus. And using the Kelly model, you can calculate the strength. Actually, calculating the strength using Kelly model is just the, you know that at the critical aspect ratio, the fiber contribution is half. So it is sigma F, it is 1000 into half, 1000 into half VF EF plus VM into EM by EF, some formula like that. You just plug it in and you get the answer. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good. Okay. And we also had Viva for 7 students. Mostly it was okay, but I would expect slightly better performance maybe from next time. Okay, so today we want to discuss the mesomechanics of composite materials. So let me share a few slides that I have created. for today's discussion. Or before that, I am officially closing the micromechanics of composites. I hope it is okay. Does anybody have any question, comments on micromechanics? Okay, if not, then let us go to our. Is my slide visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. So in the very beginning of this course, we said that the manufacturing of composites have 3 stages. The first is micromechanics, the second is mesomechanics, and the third is macromechanics. In the micromechanics, we studied that if the properties of the fiber and the matrix is known, what is the property of your lamina? Now, in the mesomechanics, we are not going to look at what is the fiber or what is the matrix. Rather, we are just looking at the lamina as a whole. And the properties of the lamina is known. But if I have multiple laminas on one on top of each other, what is the property of the laminate? So for mesomechanics, my building block is lamina, not the fiber and the matrix, but the lamina. So the expectation is through micromechanics, you get the properties of the lamina. And in mesomechanics, you don't care too much about what the fiber is, what the matrix is. As long as you know the equivalent or the effective properties of your lamina, how can you calculate the effective properties of the laminate? That is the main objective. Okay. So now, and macromechanics is, of course, if you know the property of a laminate, how can you do a component level simulation? Macromechanics is not part of this course because it will require extensive FE skills. We'll discuss it briefly, but mesomechanics and micromechanics are the 2 most important parts that we are going to discuss. So, 1 minute. So now you know how to calculate the effective properties of a single lamina. Yes, you will use either rule of mixtures or you will use Alpensine methods, or if the fibers are short, then you will use Cox, etc., etc. You also know how to calculate the modulus in different orientations. So using your rule of mixtures, you get the modulus in the coordinate axis system such that the x coordinate, the x axis is in line with your fiber direction. But you also know how to transform and how to calculate the modulus and other properties in different orientation. Now what we are going to do is we are going to imagine a composite material such that different laminas are on top of each other, and on top of each other you are putting it and you want to calculate the effective properties. Okay. Now briefly we had discussed this, that we can calculate the effective properties using rule of mixtures, where we said if I make isostrain, then the effective modulus is the thickness weighted, or the thickness weighted properties. However, what happens when you try to bend it? That is the most important challenge, because if you remember that most structures in the aeroplane that we discussed, which were made of composite materials, were flat plates, flat plate-like structures like the wing of aeroplane, the fuselage. These are mostly flat, one dimension is thick. And if my structure is flat, so what kind of loading can I expect? The wing of an aeroplane is subjected to what type of loading, you think?
So bending load.
Bending, yes. So what happens when we are trying to do bending load? Can we do a thickness weighted average? What do you think? Or do you think that the exact location of your different layers will become important? To give you a hint, let me ask you another question. I'm sure all of you have seen a railway track, yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Railway track is I-shaped, yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
if we make the railway shape instead of I shape, if we make it cross shape, will it be equally efficient?
No.
No, sir.
Why not? I mean, let me try to draw something. Okay, so this is one option. This is one option. Let's say the area in both the cases is the same, and then I want to make railway tracks or any structural member for bending. Do both the shapes will both the shapes give me the same response?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Why not?
Sir, its
Sir, the
moment
moment-
resisting capacity will decrease if we
But the
change.
moment of inertia is different in both the cases. So therefore, the bending will be more in the first case.
So that is right. So similarly, when I'm making a composite material and I want to subject it to bending, does it make more sense to have 90 degrees at the middle and 0 degree lamina at the top? 0 degree means the stiffness at the top and bottom layers are higher, and at the middle layers I'm putting low stiffness material. So my point is this. So let's draw something. Okay. Let's say that instead of making an eye, what I'm proposing is that at the top and bottom, I will put stiff composites. At the middle, I will put not so stiff composites. So let us say I put 0 degree at the top and bottom and 90 degree in the center. So can you, I mean, are you able to see that both of them are similar in some ways? When we are looking at metals, we are putting less metal in the center, more metal at the top and bottom. Similarly, when I'm trying to design a composite material, can I put 0 degrees at the top and bottom and less stiff material in the center?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So we conclude that if I have a layered structure and it is subjected to bending, then first of all, the Euler-Bernoulli theorem that we have learned in our mechanics of solids is not valid because it was meant for isotropic materials. And the second thing, we understand that somehow the relative position of the different layers are going to be important. We don't know yet how to account for that, but the layup sequence is going to be very important. And this is basically our aim for maybe next 2 weeks, that if a layered structure is given to us, we know the properties of the different layer. If it is subjected to bending load, what is the radius of curvature? How can we calculate those things? What is the effective response? What is the stress in individual layers? For isotropic materials, you know that at the neutral axis, the stress is 0, and then it increases or decreases linearly as you go away from the center. Now, for a laminate, when the material is not isotropic, will that happen, or will the stress increase or decrease in some other fashion? We are trying to answer these interesting questions. Is the problem statement clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Oh, good. So let us look at. So one simplification we are going to make is that we are looking at layered structures, that is right, but we are looking at each layer is very thin. So each layer is in a state of plane stress. And as a reminder, I'm copying this slide which we have discussed earlier. If each layer is in a state of plane stress, we can have the stress strain relationship as shown in this box. That no need to write stiffness as a 6 by 6 matrix. We can also do compliance and apparent stiffness as a 3x3 matrix relating stress and strain. And we also know how to transform the Q matrix from one coordinate axis system to the other. So we are not using the generalized Hooke's law. We are going to start from this stress-strain relationship. This is because I am making a simplification that each of my layers are in a state of plane stress because they are very, very thin. So before we go forward, now we want to understand some naming scheme. Naming scheme means if a certain layup is given, how do we communicate that to one another? Okay. So there are some rules that we have to keep in mind. The first is the laminate sequence is always depicted by using square bracket. So you start with a square bracket. You start from the top lamina and go downward. So the lamina which is at the topmost layer, the orientation of that lamina must be put at the top, and then you go one step at a down. Distinct layer or group of layers is separated by a oblique. If same lamina is repeated, subscript n is chosen. Symmetric laminates are designated by subscript s over the bracket. Okay, so let us look at a few examples. For example, if I tell you in a square bracket 0/90, it means that I have a laminate with two layers 0 and 90. If it is 0 subscript 2/90 subscript 2, it means 0, 0, 90, 90. There are 4 layers. If I say square bracket, inside the square bracket plus minus 45 subscript 3. So it is plus 45 minus 45 plus 45 minus 45 plus 45 minus 45 3 times. So you have 6 layers. If I say 0/90 inside the square bracket S, it means 0, 90, 90, 0. So it is symmetric about the 90 degree. And 0/92, 0/90, everything subscript 2, it means 0/90, 0/90. This is how we are going to name a certain lamina sequence to get a laminate. Okay. So look at the last one. Can anybody tell me what is the layup sequence which is designated by the final, the layup sequence written at the bottom? Or first of all, tell me how many layers are there?
6.
8, sir.
6 or 8?
8, sir.
6.
8,
sir.
8, because
8,
it's
sir.
minus 45. So what is the layup sequence? Plus 45, below that is minus 45, then you have 0, then you have 90. Below that we have 90, 0, minus 45, plus 45. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Clear? Understood?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
The layup sequence like this. Say bracket if it is this, what do you think will be the layup sequence? So it can be that my point is that this is an example of a layup sequence where part of the composite is, where part of the laminate is symmetric. This will be 30, 60, 60, 30, 90, and then you repeat it because of this subscript 2. Something like this. Clear?
Yes, sir.
main point of discussing this is that a part of the laminate could be symmetric. So symmetric need not be outside the bracket. You are going to, so in this notation, square bracket means you are saying that your layup sequence has ended. And your round bracket means it is part of a larger scheme and that you are going to add more layers to it. Okay, another thing is in this slide, I've only said 0, 45, 90, 30, 60. That does not mean that we are only limiting ourselves to 0, 45, 90, 30, 60. In principle, it could be any angle. Okay, and plus minus 45 could also be minus plus. Means minus 45 plus first and then plus 45 second. For that, I have to use the sign of not plus minus but minus plus. Okay, is this layup sequence scheming naming clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
This is important because whenever you are trying to solve a problem on mesomechanics, the first piece of information that you have to process is going to be the layup sequence. Once the layup sequence is known, only then you can progress with the different steps. Okay, so now let us look at our notation. What notation are we going to use? So imagine that this picture that I have shown is the lamina. Okay, and what is the, so before doing any derivation, then we have to start with some coordinate axis system, some notation. We are trying to solve this problem where there are a number of layers. Let's say there are n number of layers. Each layer can have its own property. We want to find out how this laminate is going to behave when subjected to bending or other types of loads. So the different naming scheme that the convention we are using is that the central layer is going to be my origin. Okay, this is number one. My origin is not at the top, not at the bottom, is at the central layer. If I have even number of lamina, then the origin is where, let's say there are even 2n number of laminas. So if then after n lamina, my origin will start. If it is 2n plus 1, then it is going to be the center of the middle layer, is where my origin is going to be placed. All my derivation is based on this sign convention. Number one. Number two, z is going to be positive downwards. So I'm going to use this coordinate axis system as shown. Z is positive downwards, x and y. Okay, and the lamina is going to be numbered from top to bottom. Even the naming scheme was going from top to bottom. So I'm going to start with 1 at the top and n at the bottom, 1, 2, 3, dot, 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 dot. Okay. The next system of naming is that the z, and for me only the z coordinate axis is going to be important because I am going to assume that throughout my plane each of the layers have the same cross section. The thickness might be different, but they have the same cross section on one on top of each other. So only the z coordinate axis is important for me, and it is named as following. The top layer is z0, where layer 1 finishes, layer 2 starts, that coordinate axis, that coordinate is z1, and so on and so forth. The layers which are above the central line have negative values of z, below have positive values of z. Okay, so based on this scheme, the thickness of the kth layer is zk minus 1 minus zk. Is this clear? Please have a good look at it. If there is any doubts, let me know.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, could you explain how the origin is chosen
The
again?
origin is the central line. So if there are, let us say, 2n number of layers, this figure shows n, but imagine that, let's say, imagine that n is an even number. If n is an even number, then the origin is at the layer after n by 2 layers. So where n by 2 layers is finishing, I will put the origin there. Or if it was odd, n is odd, then the layer which is at the center, which is right at the middle of the layer which has equal number of layers over and below it, it is the mid of that layer. In other words, if the thickness of the lamina is 2h, then the lamina is at a distance h or minus h from the top or bottom respectively.
Okay, sir.
Okay, is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now let us look at the assumptions that we are going to make. So the classical lamination theory is sometimes also known as first order shear deformation theory. Okay, and these assumptions were made by two researchers whose name was Kirchhoff and Love. These are also known as the Kirchhoff-Love assumptions. This is not Kirchhoff, it is Kirchhoff. So Kirchhoff-Love assumption, they said that if I have a lamina, if it is subjected to bending, any one line which is straight will remain straight. So this line, which was straight to start with, after you bent it, you applied some load, so there was some deformation, the midplane gets deformed. However, this straight line which is perpendicular to the undeformed midplane is also perpendicular to the deformed midplane and it is straight. This is the Kirchhoff-Love assumption. Imagine that you have a thick book. Okay, in the thick book is also a sort of a layered structure, yeah, where you are putting multiple pages one on top of the other. On one side of the book, don't open the book. On the one side of the closed book where you can see multiple pages, draw a straight line and then try to bend it. What will you see? What will happen to that straight line? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? In a class, this was easy to explain, but let me try. So, imagine that this is my book, okay? My book is actually like, so this is actually my book where so I mean this is my book, at the top is the cover. So this is actually the cover page. So I'm looking at the book from the sideways. Now in this blue is where you are seeing the large number of pages, which are basically you just see one page on top of other. And on that page, let us say you draw a straight line using a scale. Okay, and then you try to bend the book. What happens to this straight line? Have you tried this experiment?
Yes, sir. It will remain straight.
Will it?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Not remain straight. But the Kirchhoff-Love assumption says that it will remain straight. Okay, this remains straight. This is valid only when the different pages are glued to each other. If you stick the different pages and then if you try to bend, the straight line will remain straight. But in a book, the different pages are not glued. You can flip through the pages, and where you are bending it, different pages can slide. So they don't actually, there will be a slight deviation from straight, but straight line remains straight when the plies are well bonded. Means there is perfect adhesion between the different layers. Actually, it should not be, sorry, this should be lamina. And the pages are very thin. That the thickness is at least 10 times smaller than the shortest surface dimension. And the layer stiffness will differ less than 2 orders of magnitude. I mean, you cannot have one layer whose stiffness is 10 and the other layer whose stiffness is 100 gigapascal, and if you try to bend it, that straight line will not remain straight. So this is the Kirchhoff assumption, which is only the this. This is the assumption that they have made, and this is valid when these things are there. Okay. There are many textbooks which make all the 5 bullet points, they just name it as the Kirchhoff assumption, which is not correct. Kirchhoff assumption is only the first 2 points. This is valid when these 3 things are there. Kirchhoff did not make the bottom 3 assumptions. Even the book by Erakovich incorrectly says that all the 5 are Kirchhoff assumption. It is not true. Okay. And do you know what is a sandwich in the context of composite materials?
So we had a different material in between the layers.
In lamina also we have a different. Sandwich is a material where you have stiff top and bottom. Let's say you put carbon fiber unidirectional at the top and bottom, and you put foam in the center. By putting foam in the center, you are actually trying to make like a eye section. Foam has lot of voids, so you can imagine it like a eye structure with composite material. So the middle is foam, very soft, and far away from the center line are 2 stiff layers of carbon fiber. That is known as a sandwich material. So this assumption is not going to be valid for sandwich materials because the layer stiffness is more than 2 orders of magnitude. Okay. Is this Kirchhoff assumption clear? Is this figure clear? Which line I'm talking about? I'm talking about this line, okay? That this line remains straight. So this orange line, can you see? So you have multiple layers, and you had an orange line, and this was the undeformed line which is straight. After you applied the load, it bent. So this mid plane, which is the solid line, it has become this curved line. But this orange line is perpendicular to the deformed plane also. This is not going to change. This orange line is going to remain straight, and the orange line is also going to remain perpendicular to the mid plane. This is the Kirchhoff assumption. Another important point, maybe slightly misleading, is that this orange line that I have drawn could be anywhere in the composite. It need not be at the edge. At all points, this straight line is going to remain straight. Even though this figure kind of suggests that this straight line is where the 2 side faces meet, and I'm only interested in that straight line, that is not true. That could have been a straight line anywhere inside, not only in the surface, but anywhere. If there is a straight line which is perpendicular to the undeformed midplane, is going also to remain perpendicular to the deformed midplane.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, how does these assumptions take care of the curvature that are associated with bending, sir? Because due to yes, sir.
So you're saying that how does this assumption take care of the bending load? Is it? Do I understand correctly?
The curvature of the different layers that will come due to bending.
That we'll do derivation now. We'll start from this assumption, and then we are going to do derivation in the next few classes. This is only the assumption. So the first thing we are trying to make sure is that we understand the assumption, the notations clearly. When we make our derivation, this factor that you're talking about will be accounted for.
Okay, sir.
Okay, any other question? So if not, then maybe we can end this lecture. Today was a slightly short lecture, but it's okay. Any other question? Can we stop this lecture, or anything else that you want to talk about, or anything you want to discuss?
So could you explain that question where you said that it was transversely isotropic and only two constants were needed?
So do you understand that it is transversely isotropic?
Yes, sir.
Now let us look at. So this is my plane stress. Is my slide visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We are looking at the Q matrix, correct?
Yes,
We
sir.
are looking at the Q matrix, and these E1, E2, Nu12, and G12 are the different constants. Okay. Since it is isotropic, E1 is equal to E2, and G12 is a function of E1 and Nu12. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Clear?
Yes, sir.
Sir, in the fourth question, answer can be the transverse tensile strength.
Fourth question, 1 minute.
So the strength of matrix is less than the matrix, composite less than the matrix strength.
Strength of a fiber reinforced composite be lower than. This is also correct. You are right.
Yes, sir.
Strength
And the
of
shear strength is,
composite will be lower than the strength of the matrix if the loading is in the transverse direction.
yes, sir. Due to the stress contention factor.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
But be careful, that is only onset of damage.
What, sir?
That is only using that method, that is only onset of damage. That is theoretically correct, but in real life it might not be correct because you are only calculating the onset of damage. Onset means when the damage has started. Unlike a brittle material where there is a single crack which propagates catastrophically, in composite materials that does not happen. Even if there is an onset of damage, then it can just go on and on and on. Let me show you a very interesting video. 1 minute. I can show you something which is very nice. Is a Chrome tab visible to you?
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Do you see this GIF file that is being shared?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Do you know what is this? This is actually a composite material. So you can see this gray, these are the fibers. So it is a textile composite, okay? Fibers are not straight, they are going on one on top of the other like a textile. This composite was subjected to fatigue loading and a microscope with a camera is placed. So we are watching as the fatigue loading is taking place. This was done when I was a PhD student. This was done by one of my fellow PhD students. So what you are seeing here is that composite material subjected to fatigue loading and we are watching. So what do you see? You see all these cracks?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
These are all cracks, but despite all the cracks, the composite material was still taking the load. You will be surprised to know that even after so much damage, the composite material actually survived 10,000 loads of cycle. 10,000 cycles of load, sorry. And in fact, when you are flying in an aeroplane, there are some parts made out of composite material which are behaving like this, but it's still okay and we are fine with this. So onset, so my point is onset of damage is not equal to final failure of the composite material. It can still take a large amount of load even after the damage has been onset. And the models that we have learned in our course for transverse loading is only for onset of damage. We cannot do progressive damage using analytical means. Progressive damage means that after onset of damage, what happens? How does my damage propagate or how does my damage progress? That we have not learned how to model. There is another video which is a close-up. Now you can see more clearly. Look, there is this is the fiber. And this is the fiber matrix debonding that has taken place. This is matrix cracking. You can follow my mouse, no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So you can see clearly, look, this is fiber matrix debonding. This is the fiber. This white is the matrix. This is fiber matrix debonding that we can see. This is matrix cracking. This is also another fiber matrix debonding. This is fascinating, na? Very interesting, na? Real life example of
Yes.
what.
So what is that dark stuff? You said that is fiber and white one is matrix.
This is
That-
so. This is a textile composite. Na? In a textile composites, you have fibers which are warp, which is along the screen, and web, which is perpendicular to the screen.
Oh, okay.
I mean, look at your shirt. Your shirt has 2 layers of fabric, yes, and they are perpendicular to each other. I mean, there are 2 threads which are going through each other, yes.
Yes, sir.
So one is warp and weft, we call it. Okay, good. So I hope I'm able to drive home. Na? The onset of damage is not final failure. Please keep it very important.
Sir,
Yes.
in question number 3,
Yes.
we have given that we have to manufacture 50 parts daily on daily basis.
Yes.
So like if we see the shape complexity versus annual graph of different manufacturing processes, like in the slides,
Okay. Yes. Tell me.
there the hand layup process, it is given that at max 100 number of parts are manufactured, that too annually.
Is it given like that? That's slightly old, I think, but 50 daily, I think, can be done hand layup. As I said, it's open-ended. So if you've written something, you've described it, and even, I mean, like we are discussing it, it is open-ended. 50 daily can be done hand layup. Maybe we are pushing the limits of hand layup, but it can be done, I think.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
It's open-ended. It's open for discussion. I mean, this question can have many answers, many interpretations. Not one answer is completely right, and there are some answers which are completely wrong, but there is large number of answers which can be partially correct.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, good. Anything else? If not, then we will see each other on Monday. And before we go, I forgot to. So in the first class test, we had micromechanics and manufacturing. So till the second class test, we will do mesomechanics and testing of composites. Okay, this I think I forgot to tell you. So just like we had manufacturing, which was like a theoretical description part, this time we are going to have testing of composites, which is going to be theoretical descriptive. And the test is going to be on the 9th of March. Okay, good. So anything else, or can I close this meeting?